Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to those of you joining from elsewhere, and welcome to the latest Sector Series webinar on health, beauty and personal care. With so much currently happening at the moment within the health, beauty and personal care sector, the aim of today's webinar is really to give you all a broad strategic overview of some of the latest trends and developments happening in the sector and some of the current thinking from retailers and suppliers over the last few months. And this should really help you to try and identify where you want to invest in order to be successful in the sector going forwards. In terms of the structure for today, we've got about half an hour, so I'll start off by looking at some of our data to give you an overview of the sector itself. I'll then go on to talk about some of the broader macro drivers of change impacting the health and beauty landscape, and then we'll dig into some best-in-class examples of retailers and brands executing particularly well in the sector, and then I'll wrap up with a summary and implications. And then we should hopefully have about 5 minutes at the end for some Q&A. So do use your panel on the right-hand side to ask those questions, and I will endeavour to answer them in those last 5 minutes. Just to call out that the webinar slides will be available after the session, and you can also access the latest health, beauty and personal care sector report on the portal through your subscription. And we're also working on another health, beauty and personal care sector report, which should be available later on in October as well. So do look to that as well. So just to introduce me and Planet Retail, so we are a global retail and advisory business. We are based in different countries around the world. So I'm based here in London. I'm Florence Wright, a retail analyst. And we've also got offices in Frankfurt, Boston and Mumbai as well. And we've really used a broad range of insights today to go into the webinar. And these are some of the things that you can look towards for future inspiration in terms of trends and developments happening in the sector. So as I mentioned, we've got the health, beauty and personal care sector report, which is looking at all the latest retailer initiatives. But you can also look towards some of the more strategic insights and longer term planning reports, such as future retail disruption, which we've just launched, and some other of the other winning strategies, key capabilities and channel trends as well. So do look towards those for future sources of information as well as that sector report. So starting off then with a bit of a sector review into the health and beauty landscape. I think the key thing to mention here is that health and beauty as a sector is really growing. So this chart here is looking at the global consumer spend on health and beauty between 2013 and 2023. And over the next 5 years, we're predicting to see a growth rate of 6.5% between now and 2023. And that will realise a global consumer spend of $1.8 trillion. So that's a really significant growth. And actually, when you position that versus some of the other sectors, health and beauty is growing particularly well. So versus the likes of consumer electronics, household and pet and food and beverage, health and beauty is growing particularly fast. And in terms of some of the regions which are driving this, Asia and Oceania in particular is growing particularly fast, so it's growing around 9%, and that means that it will contribute to over 200 billion of the $500 billion added between now and 2023, and this is really driven by a rapidly developing economy and growing consumer spend, as well as fastly growing rates of technology adoption. So this is going to be a particularly important market to look towards going forwards for the sector. And what all of this growth means is that we're seeing global dominant retailers really tapping into some of the trends around health and beauty. So this chart here is looking at the top 10 global retailers. This is their total revenue now and 2023. So you can see Walmart there at the top, but actually Alibaba, Amazon and JD.com, 3 fast-growing pure-play retailers, are growing very, very quickly and will gradually close the gap on Walmart. And actually Alibaba is set to overtake Walmart over the next 5 years. And what's really interesting about some of these players is that they're now starting to tap into health and beauty around the world. So Alibaba is opening up some of its own pharmacy storefronts. You've also got Amazon entering the health and beauty landscape with the acquisition of PillPack, an online prescription pharmacy company. And then you've also got Kroger, which just today announced a partnership with Walgreens to sell its grocery products in their stores. So all of the growth that we're seeing in health and beauty is being realised by these dominant global players. But the specialists are important too. And this chart here is picking out the top 8 global health and beauty retailers ranked on their 2018 sales. So I think the key thing here is the really consolidated nature of the drugstore landscape. You've got Walgreens and CVS Health as the top 2 up there. And together, if you combine their sales, they account for over 70% of that top 8's revenue. So this really highlights the concentrated nature of the sector, and this is being driven by a number of different mergers and acquisitions in the channel. And this kind of vertical integration is really happening across the drugstore industry and creating some challenges for suppliers as well. So this is something to watch out for going forward. So in terms of the sector then, we're seeing very fast growth rates and a very consolidated sector, but actually some of the broader global dominant players are also going to be having influence on the sector going forwards. And with that in mind, I just want to turn now to talk towards some of the wider macro drivers which are really influencing the sector. And here at Planet Retail R&G, we use a STEEP framework, which stands for Society, Technology, Economy, Industry and Policy. And these are some of the drivers that we believe will be most important in influencing and disrupting retail over the next decade. And for health, beauty and personal care, this is really important because ultimately these drivers are really shaping some of the capabilities and initiatives that we're seeing in this area. And I just want to call out 4 key drivers which I think are going to be particularly important over the next few years for health and beauty. So the first is around the store. So increasingly consumers are becoming a lot more experience driven. So they're shifting their spend away from products to experiences such as traveling, entertainment and dining out. And as a result, the store is becoming much more important as a space for engagement and experience. And things like beauty in particular will be utilised in order to really revamp the store and drive experience going forward. Secondly, in terms of mobile is really breaking through, particularly in some of those emerging economies who've leapfrogged like laptop and computer technology. And this is driving the uptake of things like virtual healthcare provision. Aging as well is going to have a massive impact. So the old age dependency ratio is rising, and this is going to create more demand for healthcare in particular, and particularly healthcare that centres around proximity and fast on-demand delivery. And finally, values are going to also play an increasing role in the health and beauty sector, placing more emphasis around product sourcing and origins. And as a result of these 4 key drivers, there are a number of different implications which are going to require new strategies from both brands and retailers. And this is how we have got to our 4 winning strategies. So those winning strategies are Store of the Future. That's all about transforming the store into experiential hubs. E-commerce and digital ecosystem management, building new digital capabilities. Supply chain and fulfilment, which is really around creating faster and on-demand fulfillment methods, and shopper engagement and retention, creating personalized communication with your customers. And these are the 4 strategies that we're using today to kind of pull out some of the key capabilities that we're seeing from brands and retailers. So firstly, turning to Store of the Future, and 3 key things that I've been seeing lately in the sector. So the first is around frictionless in-store healthcare. The second is curated premium ranges, and the third is around elevating the beauty experience. And on the theme of frictionless healthcare, this is a really interesting example. It comes from Alibaba, which is the top e-commerce player globally. And they just launched a 24-hour pharmacy in China, which is a really innovative future store concept which integrates a lot of technology. And the store is operating under the Alipay brand, which is Alibaba's payment system. And I think what's really interesting about this store is the way in which customers can use technology to access healthcare in a very frictionless and convenient way. So one of the things that they can do is pay via facial recognition, which you can see here in this image. And there's another interesting concept where they've got vending machines right at the front of the store, which are open 24/7, and they contain a range of health and personal care items which customers can basically access at any time they want. And I think this is a really innovative example and something that we haven't seen quite so well done yet in terms of providing customers with really frictionless access to healthcare. And particularly in markets like China, where the elderly population is growing so quickly, this kind of concept we would expect to see kind of continuing going forwards. Another really interesting example here from Carrefour. So they traditionally play more in the grocery sector, but actually they're really emphasizing beauty in their stores. And this is linked to some of the trends that I talked about earlier in terms of growing consumer growth around health and beauty. So I actually went to this store in Barcelona a few months ago, and they merchandised the beauty category really interestingly here. So they had a really big space in the center of the store for the beauty category, and they basically put brands at the center of this. So they put all of the different brands next to each other, kind of like a shop in a shop type concept. It gave it more of a department premium store kind of feel, and it really kind of elevated the beauty experience. So this is a good example of the ways in which some traditional grocers are tapping into trends around health and beauty. And an example here from a CPG. So Unilever are also recognising how the role of the store can kind of engage customers, particularly with reference to beauty and personal care. So they launched a pop-up shop in New York under the St. Ives brand, and this is actually the second year that they've run it, so it clearly had some kind of success last year. And what's really interesting about this store is the way that customers can go in and really experience something new. So they visit this mixing bar, which is in the diagram here, where they can create their own custom skincare products. And there's also an online extension of this where they can go online and do that as well. So again, a really good example of how brands are elevating the beauty experience using the physical store itself. So moving on now to look at e-commerce and digital ecosystem management. A couple of key themes here. The first is expanding digital ecosystems, and the second is around the provision of virtual care. So under this theme of expanding digital ecosystems, this Amazon PillPack acquisition is a really good story to talk about. So this happened earlier this year. Amazon acquired the online pharmacy PillPack, and this was a really major news story, and it does threaten to kind of disrupt the healthcare industry, but it is subject to regulatory approval, which is expected to go through later this year. So PillPack is an online pharmacy. They organise prescription medication and vitamins and deliver them to customers' homes. And I think through this acquisition, Amazon gains a number of things which it didn't previously have. So the first is that it gains pharmaceutical distribution licenses in all 50 US states. And it also gains a number of relationships with insurance companies over in the US, which PillPack has already kind of developed. So it's probably a bit too soon to say at the moment what kind of impact this will have on the healthcare landscape, but there's certainly some kind of really innovative developments that this could lead to, particularly in terms of Amazon offering its own OTC medication as part of the PillPack packages, or they could also integrate their own Alexa voice technology into the ordering system of these PillPack subscription boxes. So a number of things that we could potentially see going forward, and I think this is definitely something to watch out for in terms of future disruption around healthcare. And as we're seeing these digital players like Amazon launching into the healthcare industry, some of the more traditional players such as Walgreens are also kind of fighting to develop their own digital propositions. So this is something that they launched earlier this summer. It's called Find Care Now, and it's a mobile app whereby customers can go on and connect to local doctors and clinics across the US. And they can also look at prices for healthcare services across those doctors and clinics as well. So it's a really interesting concept. Currently, there are just 16 local health systems participating, but Walgreens is expected to kind of roll this out going forward. So, you know, this really highlights how this trend of on-demand health and virtual health is now feeding into some of the existing dominant players, such as Walgreens, and how digital is going to be really important going forward. So on the theme of supply chain and fulfillment, this is our third winning strategy. There's some interesting initiatives happening recently in the way of replenishment. So brands and retailers coming up with new innovative ways to replenish health, beauty and personal care items, and doing so in an increasingly on-demand way. So doing that with quicker delivery times. So Holland and Barrett in the UK have recently launched this health box. So this is a relatively new concept for them. They're traditionally more of a kind of store-based health chain. And basically what this concept does is it provides personalised supplements to customers' homes. They can go online and do a free health and lifestyle consultation, and then they get the health supplements delivered to their homes. So I think we are seeing gradually this rise of subscription in the industry, and as I mentioned with PillPack, this is something that's going to be happening more going forward. I think what Holland and Barrett have done quite interestingly here is really tap into this aspect of personalisation and customisation through this model. So the fact that customers can go online and do this consultation beforehand really kind of tailors the product to them and creates more of a sense of engagement in terms of this fulfilment model. Another example here from GSK, they own the Sensodyne toothpaste brand, and in the UK they promote Sensodyne across different dental surgeries. They send out samples, and this previously involved their own staff kind of going to these dental surgeries to physically distribute the samples. But what GSK have done, really interestingly, they've rolled out this Amazon Echo into certain dental surgeries across London, and dentists can now use these in order to reorder the Sensodyne samples through voice technology. They can also use these Amazon Echoes to engage with patients in the dentist room through playing music or entertainment. So a really good example here of how brands and retailers can use technology in order to provide fulfillment and also to provide engagement. So for GSK, this is going to reduce their operational costs, but it will also enable them to establish a deeper presence in the professional healthcare community. So some good examples there of innovation in terms of supply chain and routes to consumer. And moving on now to our last winning strategy. So this is shopper engagement and retention. I think the key thing here from a health, beauty and personal care perspective is this, the way that they are trying to create interactive engagement with consumers, and particularly leveraging digital and social platforms in order to provide this communication. So L'Oreal are quite active in this space. So they do a lot in terms of translating the offline experience online and really providing a very interactive beauty experience for consumers. And they recently launched this new virtual try-on tool. This was at the beginning of September. And it basically provides consumers with ways to experience over 300 of their products. They can access this directly from the L'Oreal Paris website, so there are no additional apps needed. And it uses facial recognition technology, so consumers can go on and use this in a very personalised way. And as part of the launch, L'Oreal did talk about the ways in which it's really trying to help transform the ways in which people can experience beauty, and particularly in the digital channel. And this is a really great example of the ways in which brands can try and offer consumers a very convenient, instantaneous, but personalised way to experience and try on products. And I think this is something that we're definitely seeing more of. So some of the big beauty brands such as Sephora as well have got very well-known virtual and augmented reality offerings. So yeah, definitely watch out for more of these going forward, particularly in relation to beauty. An interesting story from Amazon here. This just came out last week. So they partnered with Snapchat on visual search. So basically what this is within the Snapchat app, customers can go on and use the app's camera to point at an item, and then they can find that quickly on Amazon. They can find things like reviews, they can find the product pricing, and then they can actually go and buy it as well. And the example here on this slide is Coty's brand CoverGirl, which is being linked. So, you know, they're highlighting the applications here for the beauty industry and makeup in particular. And visual search and image recognition is really generating new ways for brands and retailers to engage with shoppers and try and make the whole experience a bit more seamless. I think it's still a very new concept. It's yet to fully take off, but you've got the likes of Instagram and Pinterest already operating similar shopping features. And so this latest development could prove quite influential, I think, particularly amongst some of those heavy users of social media, such as millennials. So just to summarise then and wrap up some of the key themes that we've seen, So we've talked about themes across each of our winning strategies: store of the future, e-commerce and digital ecosystem management, supply chain and fulfillment, and shopper engagement and retention. And I think what's quite clear is some of the linkages in terms of the broader overarching themes that we're seeing across all of these categories and strategies. So for example, if we look at healthcare, what's really interesting is this aspect of frictionless health provision, and that's linking in all of the different winning strategies. So both in terms of the store, so we saw the integration of technology from the likes of Alibaba's Future Pharmacy, but also in terms of the provision of things like virtual care through mobile apps and automated replenishment and innovative fulfillment options as well. And then when we look at beauty, the key theme coming out there is really around how brands and retailers are elevating the experience. And again, that's through in-store, but also through translating some of those store experiences online as well, through innovative apps and social media platforms as well. And so what does this mean from a supplier perspective? We've just picked out here a few key implications and kind of actions here that you can take from this webinar and some of the initiatives that I've just talked about. So under Store of the Future, the key thing here is really around how you as a brand can work with your retail customers to drive that in-store experience, and particularly with reference to things like packaging, merchandising solutions, pop-up shops such as the likes of Unilever, which I discussed earlier, really trying to elevate that brand experience in store and provide kind of a centre for consumers to go to. In terms of e-commerce and digital ecosystem management, the key theme here is about placing a really central focus on your digital strategy as well as that store strategy. And we saw that with the likes of L'Oreal, really trying to recreate those in-store experiences online and doing all sorts of innovative stuff in that area in terms of optimizing search and really elevating that digital content. Under supply chain and fulfillment, the key question here you should be asking yourself is how you can innovate in terms of those routes to consumers, and in terms of those new routes, how you can respond to increasing demands around speed, automation and personalization, as we saw with the examples of Sensodyne. And finally, shopper engagement and retention. Key kind of call to action here is around more personalized and creative engagement, and increasingly how you can integrate brands on social media platforms and provide education and engagement via virtual assistants as well, like Amazon and L'Oreal. And so with that, I will wrap up, and I'm really happy now to take any questions that you might have. Alternatively, you can email them through to these email addresses, either of these two, at the end of the webinar. So I'll give a couple of minutes now just to check the questions. Okay, so I've got a couple of questions here. So will the presentation be available after the session via send out or other source? Yes, we will be emailing the presentation out to you probably tomorrow. There was another question on the Walgreens figures in the chart. So does this include Boots? Yes, it does. We capture Walgreens and Boots together after they merged. So that is all reflected both in historical and current data. And in terms of the sourcing of the data as well, so this will come from our latest retail market monitor. So that's a combination of market and retail data as well. So that's all sourced from us and our data sources. One more question here. Out of the 4 of the winning strategies discussed, where do you see most emphasis in terms of retailer initiatives now and over the next few years? So yeah, I think the emphasis is happening across all. I think at the moment, supply chain and fulfillment is quite a key one, definitely from a health and personal care standpoint, because with the likes of Amazon potentially going to be impacting the sector, and then on-demand healthcare provision becoming more and more important. The ways in which healthcare can be provided to consumers in a quick, efficient and convenient way is going to become more and more important. And I think that will only become more important going forward in terms of the future, but with a particular emphasis on digital as well. And the beauty, I think at the moment, it is definitely more about the store and how retailers can use the beauty category. So there's a lot more opportunity now for brands to really focus on how they can elevate that store experience and work with retailers in order to do that. And then there's one more question here. Given the emphasis on e-commerce and digital, how much of an impact will virtual care have on healthcare? Will it replace in-store pharmacies and so on? So I think it's definitely very important at the moment, but I don't think it's taken off fully yet. And I also don't think it's going to replace it, but it will just become more and more important. And those kind of trends that I talked about earlier, such as aging, will encourage that more and more through the likes of virtual care provision. And there's also challenges at the moment in terms of healthcare provision as well, and making that more accessible. So all of these kind of macro drivers are kind of lending themselves towards virtual care, but at the same time, personalized services are still going to be very, very important. And so I think retailers and brands will need to kind of be able to offer both, and that's definitely what we're seeing more of. So then there's one more question here. Are the retailers of health and beauty going into refurbished store concepts to get more engagement with the customer? Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we're seeing that a lot. So if you look at some of the latest store concepts from the likes of Walgreens, from the likes of AS Watson, they're refurbishing a lot of their stores and actually opening up new store concepts as well. So AS Watson have just opened up an interesting new store in China, really focusing more on the brand experience there and kind of integrating some innovative technology as well. And then that's that story that I talked about that came out this morning of Walgreens and Kroger partnering as well. You can see the way that Walgreens are trying to integrate grocery into more of their stores as well to kind of provide more and more services. So that's, yeah, definitely something that we're seeing. Okay, well, that's it in terms of questions. So thank you very much for joining. As I said, the slides will be available and sent out after the webinar. You can also access the latest health, beauty and personal care sector report on the portal, and we're working on one that will go out in October as well, so do look out for that. Thank you all very much for joining. Thanks for your time, and hopefully speak to you soon.